Happy Tuesday! Today is the second in our series on the menstrual cycle. Today we're going to talk about the follicular phase, and I am just waiting for Evie to join us so I can invite her in. Let's see if I can find her here. Oh, technological issues. As you noticed, if you were with us last time, we had some issues, but it looks like today's gonna work. I just accepted her invite to come on in, and let's see if it works today. Okay, go live. All right. All right, I am accepting this. It looks like today we're still having some issues with it being able to work for her to come in. I'm not sure what's going on. Accept. Okay, I have accepted, and I am hoping. All right, I am going to go out real quick and try to come back in to see if there is something going on my end that is making it difficult for her to come in, because she has asked to join and it says she's unable to join. So I'm going to wait for her. Evie, if you're there, try to request again, and I'm not going to invite you, and let's see if that just works, if I just accept it that way. I wonder if there's something going on when I am also inviting you to join and you ask to join. So why don't you ask to join again, and I will try to accept that so that you can get on here with us as well today. Okay, accept. All right, I am accepting it. There we go, yay! Only a few tries today.
Thank goodness.
Yes, thank goodness. I was starting to get worried a little bit there that it wasn't gonna work again. So I think in the future, I will not invite you. I will just wait for you to make the request and let you in, because I'm wondering if it's something about that. But we're both here. It worked.
Yeah, we're here. We've done it. We've managed it.
We've done it. We've done it. Yes. Well, as you know, today is the second in our mini series of the menstrual phase, and we're going to go through all 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. And today is all about the follicular phase. But I thought first we would just quick introduce ourselves again a little bit, let you know our Enneagram types and where we both are also in our cycles, because we were just talking, we're kind of at opposite places, which I think is kind of interesting. So I will start. My name is Lindsay Frazier. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist and an IA credit professional out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I specialize in relationships and sexuality utilizing the Enneagram. I am an Enneagram type 9 with a wing of 1, who is social and self-preservation with the sexual instinct in the last position. So today in my menstrual cycle, I just started the luteal phase, which is actually 2 more weeks after today that we will talk about that particular phase. But it will be very interesting for us to talk a little bit about how energetically we are probably going to both be a little bit different. But I'm going to hand it off to Evie for her to introduce herself and talk a little bit about what she does as well.
Sure. Oh, thanks, Lindsay. So my name is EVIE JENNER. I'm the menstrual cycle Enneagram coach. I love to support people, lots of different people who have menstrual cycles, utilizing and using the Enneagram system. And I am a type 1 with a 2 wing, and I have a sexual instinct as my top. Which makes me can look a little bit more like a type 8 sometimes, energy-wise, because I'm that counter type in the type 1. So that's always an interesting part of the sexual one, I think. So just in case anybody else is that counter type, let me know. There don't seem to be very many of us. I'd love to meet somebody else. And I am on cycle day 9, so I am just getting into my inner spring, my follicular phase. So it's really the perfect time for me to be having this conversation. And maybe even you can see by how I am presenting today, the energy, the light in my eyes, potentially, compared to the last live that we did a few weeks ago, when I was deep into that luteal phase and was feeling much lower in energy, with my progesterone really high, so feeling a little bit spacey, a little bit yeah, not fully there. I'm 110% here today in cycle day 9. Lindsay, what cycle day are you on, just for reference?
Oh my goodness. You know, I don't even know if I know the exact day.
That's okay.
It might...
That's okay. Yeah, no, that's okay. I was just
Yeah.
going to make the point that just because my cycle day 9 is a follicular phase, I have a slightly longer cycle length, and I know, Lindsay, that you have a slightly shorter cycle length. So cycle day 9s don't all have to look like this. They might, yours might, but it also might not, and that's okay as well. So do adjust accordingly depending on your own cycle length. And if you need any extra help with that, feel free to just bob me a little message, and yeah, we can chat through that for sure. But yes, let's get into the follicular phase. So I think now, Lindsay, we obviously spoke about the menstrual phase last time, and I don't think I mentioned this last time, but the follicular phase technically does start on the first day of your menstrual phase. Now that is really confusing, and so a lot of other menstrual cycle practitioners, professionals, don't lead with that information because it can become overwhelmingly sciencey. And yes, there's lots of science going on, but there's also lots of humanity going on, and so we try to keep things a bit simple. So you and I, well, you're later into your luteal phase now, but in that first half of the menstrual cycle, it is all follicular phase. Once your period finishes, that is when your inner spring begins, and it's what many of us online are calling the follicular phase. So just in case anybody that has read maybe the Woman Code or yeah, different books and have seen it described from the beginning of your menstrual cycle, scientifically that is true, but for ease of understanding, we often talk about the follicular phase starting when your period finishes until you hit ovulation. So usually lasting for around 5 days-ish, again, totally dependent on cycle. And during this time, we might notice that we feel a bit more vibrant and higher energy. We feel a little bit more connective, and we feel quite playful and curious maybe. So it's the perfect time to try something new, to start a new hobby, to maybe go on a different kind of date that you haven't been on before. Maybe you want to go paint some pottery, or I don't know, throw some axes. I've seen lots of people doing that recently. This is the perfect time to kind of play and see what feels good and what doesn't, and learn about yourself. But it's also the perfect time to do that because in terms of our hormonal levels, all of our hormones are on the rise, with our dominant hormone being estrogen, which then leads into testosterone when we get into ovulation. But that's a conversation for next week. And so what that means is that we do have this kind of higher energy. So we're able to, you know, work out for longer or run faster. Our bodies kind of recover quicker as well. So we might find that we can be more active during this time than we can be in other parts, especially in the phase that you're in now, Lindsay, in the luteal phase or in the menstrual phase. Is that tracking? Does that make sense? Can you see in your body, Lindsay, if that's been true of your lived experience?
Yeah, I think it's definitely true. I think one of the interesting things I know you and I were talking about is like I'm a little bit slower to get moving, and I think that that's also very true with the withdrawal types, which I know we'll talk a little bit more about. Like we actually like being in the menstrual phase. Yeah. It's kind of cozy and comfortable, and so sometimes I feel like my movement is delayed. It's like I start getting movement in that inertia piece with the type 9, and all of a sudden I'm like, I want to keep moving, but my body is like, I'm a little more spacey, because like I just kind of crossed that threshold from ovulation into the early luteal phase, and it's like I noticed just the last couple, like I'm a little more spacey today. I was a little bit more tired when I woke up today, you know, and that like, but still like I'm still have the movement, of like, you know, getting things done and those types of things. So I thought that that was pretty interesting. But it is interesting, like now that we've chatted and I'm actually tracking it more, like it really does, yeah, things start to shift right around this type, you know, time.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just a really interesting thing to observe. It's like, yeah, I'm a little more tired.
Yeah.
So I'm moving into
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally, totally. And I think, you know, we're kind of talking about the follicular phase. We're talking about this heightened energy, and you know, we do see the royal you're there. We do see libidos increasing during this time. We want to be more connected to others. We want to be more connected to our significant other or others, and so there's sometimes that just happens really easily. And it's just lovely, and all the hormones are tracking, and we've eaten the right stuff, and we feel great. We feel, you know, aligned in our number, in our Enneagram type, and everything's just easy. And sometimes we don't feel like that. And that doesn't mean that we're doing our follicular phase wrong. Doesn't mean that there's, you know, something wrong that we need to go to speak to the doctor about. It just means that sometimes we've got lots of life going on and life can get in the way of stuff. And that is okay. That is also part of being a human. That is also part of having a menstrual cycle, that even though, you know, during the follicular phase, we are meant to feel this kind of extreme or heightened or hyper energy, it might not totally happen. It especially might not happen if you're on a journey to kind of get your menstrual cycle to be, you know, more in tune and more aligned. If you've struggled, maybe you have endometriosis, maybe you have PCOS, maybe you recently gave birth. You know, all of these things can have a massive impact on our cycle. So if this doesn't feel totally true for you, that's okay. It doesn't mean it won't ever, and it doesn't mean that there's necessarily something wrong with you. It's just part and parcel of having a female hormonal cycle that changes and shifts all the time. But hopefully we do kind of see these access points to increased energy, playfulness, curiosity, a little bit more fun, if I can use that word there. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think you bring up a really good point, Evie. Like one of the things that I often talk about in my practice is just the context, right? And so sometimes, like even when we're in this follicular phase and we have the hormones that are kind of driving more libido and those things, we may have other things going on in our life context, right? Like we have to kind of keep in mind like our emotional world, you know, our physical world, what we have going on at work. And so I think sometimes women can get this kind of experience of like, what's wrong with me if I sort of can't push through to sexual connection. What's interesting to me, it just kind of came to mind when you said that too, is like sometimes self-preservation dominance might be like, I have a lot more sexual energy and libido, but like I'd rather engage in self-pleasure than actually movement towards the partner. And then I think because it's less energy output, it's easier, they can get that physical pleasure needs sort of met. And I think the reason I wanted to kind of touch on that as well is I think what kind of happens with that is that can feel like to the partner, like, well, why if you have this libido, like, why wouldn't you like reach out to me, right? And I think it's really important to talk about how like, you know, self-pleasure and relational pleasure are very different things. And sometimes for relational pleasure, there are a lot more factors that come into play. So like if I'm frustrated or angry with my partner, but I'm also have a higher libido, I might be like, well, I'm still frustrated with them and like I don't want to connect with them physically, but I still have some sexual energy I want to get out, so I might engage in more self-pleasure to do that. And that kind of just, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, we should probably mention that a little bit. And just kind of how that will come into play as well for people that are kind of in this phase. And then, you know, there could be a combination of like, I feel guilt, I should reach out to my partner. And it's like, I always tell people like we need the like it's kind of like we need a balance of all three in our lives. Like you have to have a balance of relational sexuality if you have a partner. Not all of us have partners. And then you have to have your own individual sexuality. And if you're too much like individual or too much relational, like then you don't have sort of the balance that you need that's actually very healthy for sexual life. And depending on the messages that we've gotten around sexuality, sometimes we don't feel like it's okay to have sort of that self-pleasure piece if we're in a happy relationship. And what a wonderful gift to have self-pleasure for those of us that are not in a relationship and have a lot of sexual energy during this period of time, and being able to capitalize on that and enjoy the sensations that kind of come with pleasure as well.
Yes, such a hugely important point there, Lindsay. Absolutely. And I think also, when we think about this kind of curious and playful element that the follicular phase brings us, along with an increased libido, they also kind of create space for a different, I want to say version, I don't know if I fully mean that, but you know, a different aspect of who we are and who we are sexually. I think that can be a really great place to kind of, yeah, explore and experience, whether that be solo or partnered. That could be a really, yeah, beautiful and exciting place to kind of, yeah, learn a bit more about yourself, for sure. Definitely. Wow, such an important conversation.
What do you notice, Evie, like in the different stances? I know we talked about stances last time where we talked about the aggressive, the withdrawal, and the compliant
Yeah.
stance. And so I'd be really curious, sort of, what you have seen around these particular stances in the follicular. I mean, I shared mine.
Yeah, yeah,
I
totally.
stayed in the cozy, but I think it'd be really interesting to talk more about
Yeah,
sort of how you can capitalize or like what
yeah,
happened
yeah,
during these phases as well.
yeah, totally, totally. I think, you know, when we think of aggressive stance, you know, this is really geared towards them. You know, it really is a great time to be maybe an aggressive stance number, or you know, to maybe have an access point to an aggressive stance number. Now, I do think your follicular phase would be come part and parcel with maybe blind spotting into the low side of your high number, and so that's also good to be aware of if you do move. So for me as a 1, I move to 7, you know, in alignment. If I get that wrong, I can just be far too hyperactive, and not really consider the household, for example, you know, how my husband is feeling, what he's up to, as a 5. Much lower energy than me, just anyway. So then when we add in this 7 bit, yeah, whoa, that can be really intense. So I think that's something to consider. But aggressive stance numbers tend to do really well in the follicular phase. This is, you know, they move into from menstrual into follicular phase and then into ovulation with a lot of ease. It's really easy for them. There's a lot of ease in their body, in their thinking. You know, feeling we still need to work on, for sure, but that there is a lot of ease there. So that is beautiful, and I would encourage you that if you're in the aggressive stance, and you're in the follicular phase right now, enjoy it. Absolutely enjoy it. You know, make the most of it. Do what, you know, do what feels right and good for you in this time, and really make the most of it. Compliance stance, little bit of a different story. Speaking from experience, 1s, 2s, and 6s, what we tend to do in this phase is go, oh my gosh, I'm getting so much done, I'm doing so much, but every single person in my life, I'm just going to keep on doing this. I'll just do this forever. This feels really good. And I will, and I'll commit to this and this and this and this and this. And then the follicular phase ends after about 5 days. We have a moment of ovulation, which we'll talk about in our next slide. And then wham, bam, we're into the luteal phase. It's over. We've lost that heightened energy. We've kind of lost that access to being vibrant and being able to kind of just keep on going. But we've made all these commitments, and we're in the compliance stance, which means that we find it really difficult to let people down, to change the plan, to say no when we did say yes. And so I think that's really the compliance stance's work there. That's definitely my work to do, to not overcommit. So just even as an example from today, in the follicular phase, had an opportunity, knew the opportunity would be in the luteal phase. Looking at the calendar, it was not going to work out. Not very well. And so just asking, hey, actually, could we reschedule that for a week after or 2 weeks after? Having that conversation, you know, a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I wouldn't have felt like I could ask. But actually, you know, type 1, finding some logical thinking, taking a moment and saying, hey, actually, could we do it like this instead? Yes, we can. Okay, great. That's wonderful. So that would kind of be a working example there of not overcommitting, just because we feel like we've got more energy, because we do, I guess, but thinking ahead and planning ahead, for sure. Does that make sense, Lindsay? Is that tracking?
Yeah, that's tracking, and I definitely see that with clients. But it was also interesting because like I kind of had this like aha for myself, just like even with my path of 3, I'm like, oh, like sometimes I just like go 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 go.
Totally.
And, you know, like I didn't have my husband say, he's like, are you gonna like, you don't have to do so much towards like, and usually it's career oriented, it's working towards my business. And I just like, I kind of just had this aha moment that like the times that I'm probably doing that almost to excess and like not slowing down, which is more of my nature, it's probably in the follicular phase. And I hadn't even like, it hadn't even clicked to me that that's probably when that's happening. He's like, do you have to be like, can you like not work right now?
Totally.
I'm like, no, God, I can't, I gotta keep going. And I don't, you know, don't slow down where it's like, but I think it can be very interesting too, because for him, it's like, you know, I can be there, and then he doesn't get why in like 2 weeks I'm like, I'm my good old like slow moving nine. Like I want to drink my coffee. I don't want to move or do things. So it's just very interesting as I hear you say that. And I do see people in the compliance state, you know, as well, like very much committing to things that maybe they shouldn't be committing to, but then like I'm like so proud of you, like you're just like able to like, but like it's really hard for compliance stance people. It's like when they committed to that thing in their luteal phase, their menstrual phase, when they know they're not going to have as much energy or capacity, they'll still do it and push through it, even when maybe they shouldn't, right? And it's just very interesting when you talk about like the difference between like the aggressive stance, like when we talked about the last phase in menstrual, like you need to slow down, you need to like just lean into your 9 if you're an 8, for instance, right? And kind of like and then at the same time, you know, almost the opposite, like with the withdrawal types, like leaning into that energy, using that energy, not like being too cozy in the other one. So kind of that flip-flop there, right? Where it's like, go how you want to, assertive or aggressive stance, because now you've got the energy to support that, and then learning to rest when you need to rest. And that's like withdrawal. It's like, okay, you like to rest, like you need to like get moving.
Totally. And I do think, you know, if we look at it just from a physical point of view there, that we want to get the follicular phase right. You know, we're not at ovulation yet. We're going to talk about that, you know, in our next live. But we are having this surge. We're having this rise. Our hormones, you know, all of our hormones are beginning to rise. And so we want to honor that and listen to that, and then also not overdo it. And so that would maybe be my only kind of caveat there for assertive stance types, to, you know, go for it, you know, enjoy it for sure, but also let's be reasonable within that. Let's make sure that we're not, you know, I'm going to talk about 7s just because I have a really clear access point to 7 for myself, but we want to not say yes to absolutely every single thing that we've been invited to for these 5 days, because, you know, our shift when we move into luteal phase will be so sudden and so intense, we'll be exhausted. So actually, how can we enjoy it, this oozy, you know, wonderful, playful place, and yet also make sure that we're remembering to eat lunch? You know, this is something I see a lot with assertive stance types, especially in the follicular phase, forgetting lunch. just doing too much and not eating lunch. Actually, we still need to take care of our bodies, and so how do we hold both and do that well? But absolutely, the flip-flop for both, you know, from menstrual into follicular, especially for withdrawal or assertive stance, it's a big one. I think it's big. And then yes, well, we'll talk about compliance stance in ovulation, where there's quite a big flip-flop there as well. But yeah, totally. I think as well. Oh no, Lindsay.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No.
I was just gonna add like on to what you were saying with the like, especially for the assertive or aggressive stance, if you have self-preservation in the last position.
Yeah.
Because then you can completely forget about where I feel like the other phases kind of make you think about, you have to kind of think about your body a little bit more, that you could completely, so like really just, if your self-preservation repressed, like really, like how do you get more in tune with the body, and especially if you're an assertive type in that follicular phase. That's what I was going to add. Sorry, I didn't mean
Yeah,
to interrupt
no, I mean, no, that's
you.
fantastic. That's like gold dust, actually, because when we think about self-pres, especially, yeah, in the last, being in the last place, so maybe social or sexual dominant, gosh, yeah, that shift is huge. Then if we consider, you know, a social dominant or a sexual dominant in this phase, for example. And so that's really huge as well. Often we see people really know their Enneagram type, but maybe not know their instinctual stacking. And yeah, do that work, book on to a workshop, but book on with me or Lindsay, find out your instinctual subtype, because it really does open and unlock just a huge amount, a really deep wealth of knowledge there. I know for me, understanding that I was the counter type and that sometimes my energy can look very 8, even though I am very much a 1, just transformed, well, life for myself, but also for my marriage. My relationship was huge, huge, huge. So yeah, it's a really good point, Lindsay. And yeah, if you don't know your instinctual subtype, yeah, read a book, have some conversations, work it out. Both me and Lindsay have lots of resources on that, so yeah, do reach out if you need support with that. But such a great point for sure, throughout actually all of the phases. Yeah, but for ovulation, which we'll talk about again in next session, for self-pres as well, really interesting for sure. But yes, great, no, wonderful. I've lost my train of thought now.
Well, I was going to say too, is it's like, so because I'm a social 9, I'm more energetic. I will appear more energetic than some other 9s. And I think it's really interesting in the sense of, and it's really, it's the social piece that will create the more energy, right? Like when you think of like, you know, and this is why I think subtype is so important, because like the stereotypical 9 that we think of is actually a self-preservation 9. And sexual 9s will actually present a little bit more assertive than other 9s as well. So I think you bring up a really good point in the sense of like just the impact of that instinctual stacking, and that it's, you know, it really does come down again to that core motivation, right? It's so funny because I'm like, there's no question to me, Evie, that you're a 1. I can just feel it. I mean, maybe that's because I'm a gut type, and you know, like that gut intuition stuff, and it's like that's kind of what I always will follow. But it is interesting too, because people will see me as more energetic, and I'm like, yeah, you know, I hide the inertia stuff. You just don't see it because I'm social facing, and I want you to see and perceive me a certain way. So it's just very interesting how the social comes into play, sort of how I interact to relate to the world, and just like how your sexual comes into play, and how you interact to relate to the world. And then like, you know, again, with just like our cycles too, right?
Yeah, totally. And if we think that if we're in a female body, having this information is just going to unlock so much of life that maybe feels closed off, or that we don't understand why this isn't working for us. Because, you know, even if I think of type 1 friends, when I look at them, I could see like, oh, well, actually, they just seem so much more capable at holding space. You know, they're really good at holding a room, whereas you know, I'm a sexual subtype. I want to talk to the individual. and that's where how are you doing that? Oh, maybe they're in their ovulatory phase, maybe they're in their follicular phase, and maybe they're social dominant, or maybe they're self-pres, or, you know, having this information just really, really does unlock so much of life that maybe feels out of reach, or hard to come by. And so I then, just to lead on from that, when we're thinking about relationships and intimacy, we talked just at the end of last session, of our last live, excuse me, about the different types of you know, intimacy. And I just wondered if you could share kind of what your thoughts would be around follicular phase intimacy and sex, because I think that could be really helpful for, well, everybody.
Yeah, I think like one of the big things that I will say like around this particular phase is like, this is the good opportunity to sort of use our hormones to our advantage, especially if we're trying to work on having more sexual intimacy within the relationship, with the note that we said, even because your body's producing more of those hormones, you may or may not be interested. But like, I will actually have partners that are having difficulty with desire discrepancy, like, take advantage of this period of time. because your hormones are driving higher libido. It'll be easier for you to move through. And so, you know, one of the things that I will often give couples as sort of the exercise is just like, you know, setting aside time, like if you could a whole day, but if you can't, like even just like a morning, like on a weekend, you know, where it's romantic, sensual, connective time with the opportunity for sexuality to happen, but it doesn't have to happen. And that in this phase, like you're actually going to be typically a little bit more successful if you've been having difficulty or struggling in this area. Now, of course, like desire discrepancy and sexual issues in relationships are complicated. So like if you're really struggling, like I highly recommend, you know, you seek out a sex therapist or somebody in your area that can kind of help navigate that. But like if you're just looking for like even like how can I take advantage of this, like it's easier, like you already have, you're more interested usually in general, and you're more playful and you're more energetic, and it's just easier to move into sexual intimacy and connection. And so really taking advantage of, and I'll actually have, you know, people that are in heterosexual relationships, or even if you're in same-sex relationships and it's two women, your partner has the EVIE app or something similar. Like I don't really care what kind of like tracking app is. I think you use a different one, but I've used a couple. I don't really care what app it is, whatever app that's going to kind of track where you are in your cycle. And usually they're meant more for fertility. But like to me, it's like if my partner knows where I am on that app and they know that it's like the follicular or the ovulation phase, it's like this is the time. This is the time they're likely going to be more open. This is the time to kind of maybe be more initiating, things like that. And then which we'll talk about later, but like even when we get into luteal or menstrual, maybe then we don't, because we know where they're at. Or maybe we understand that those hormones maybe are creating more emotional responses or interactions based on where they're at. And so I think it's just good for us to have it. And I was actually going to ask, like, you know, like what is like the male counterpart, right? Like for our male counterparts, like we have more of a 24-hour cycle. And so like how do you help even male partners kind of understand this in more complexity?
Yeah, totally. I think, sorry, firstly, that was so great. That was so wonderful what you just said at the beginning there. We do use it. I really love the Stardust app, and they recently just launched the corresponding app for the partner to see where you're at. So whoever you are, whether you're in a heterosexual or same-sex relationship. So that is really great. I just really like them. But yeah, any app that is going to support you in your relationship, download it, get it. More, you know, information is elevation. Having your partner having the information about you, gosh, that's just gonna bring so much more ease to that part of your relationship. Use that, enjoy that, try it out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and that's fine. But maybe try giving it a go for sure. But I think when we're thinking about the male body, which does, you know, top up every 15 minutes with testosterone, and then, you know, mainly overnight. And that would be when they get, you know, fully topped up for the rest of the day whilst they're asleep. It can feel really confusing or difficult to understand, because 24 hours versus 28 days or 32 days, or some people longer, that's the disparity there in lived experience is humongous, absolutely humongous. Now, the science would suggest that the morning time is the best time to experience sex for a male body. So I would liken the follicular phase and the ovulatory phase to that morning experience for a male body, and that could be a good connecting point. Oh, how do I feel in the morning? Is she in her? Are they in their follicular phase? Can I connect that to this part of me, and can we explore that? Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be in the morning time. What I'm talking about there is kind of the internal feeling, the embodied practice of noticing how your body's feeling, and then realizing that, hey, this is where she is in her cycle right now. Let's try and, you know, work with that. Let's take advantage of that, as you said so brilliantly, Lindsay, and see what happens, with absolutely no expectation or pressure, but just with an understanding. I think is a really helpful way to find that connecting point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really like what you're saying there, you know, just because I think it can be hard for people that are in male bodies to understand sort of that difference of like where their partner is at. And like, and we'll have to have you, like, after we do the live, maybe you can comment that Stardust app. Cause I'm like, ooh, like, I haven't heard of an app that'll actually send something to your partner yet. I love the idea of that too, to have the male partner or female partner, if it's two women, having the idea to be able to look at sort of like, where is your partner in their menstrual cycle, and kind of how can you capitalize on understanding them and really supporting them in sort of the places that we are. And I think as we're getting close to the end, like, I wanted even just to mention, like, how we talked about, like, how can we support our other female friends, and understanding their different cycles. And I just love sort of the idea of, like, this community approach that we're having, and, like, how can we support, like, our other friends when they're maybe in their menstrual phase, like you said, I think you said, like, bring them soup, or you know, maybe climb in the follicular, I can do more for you. I think that, like, that community feel and full, and I really feel like we could talk more about that, but I just loved sort of that conversation that we were having there as well.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, this kind of leads on from the Stardust app, because what you can do is, if your friends have the Stardust app, so Lindsay, maybe if you download the app, and what we can do is share a code, and then I can see where you are in your cycle, and you can see where I am in my cycle. Not all the details, but just you can see what cycle day I'm on, and am I in follicular, or am I moving into menstruation, or where I'm at. That is a really incredible way, because what I've got, you know, 10 of my friends on there, and I can see where they're at. And so when I'm wanting to go, you know, swimming, I'm checking in. I'm not going to ask my friend who's bleeding this week, because she probably doesn't want to go swimming. I am going to find the friend who is follicular phase and say, hey, let's go and do this. Let's, you know, are you up for it? And I am going to, you know, send my friend who is menstruating a lovely voice note asking if they need anything, and maybe I'm going to swing by with a bag of biscuits and give them a big old hug, because sometimes bleeding is hard. So I think it's just this, you know, a sense of understanding that we're all part of something bigger, and actually I can only do my life if, you know, everybody else is here with me doing it. We're built for community. We don't want to do it alone, as much as society tells us here in the UK, or I think it feels very similar in the US, maybe, Lindsay, that you have to be alone and achieve and work hard and be by yourself. We're built for community. We don't work without community. And so actually, how can we use this information? Yes, want to honor our bodies more, but how can we honor the bodies of the people that we work with, or the people in our family, or our chosen family? Actually, that's when we start to see that this work is, yes, transformative for the self, but it's activism. It's making sure that nobody is left behind, whoever you are. And that's where I think this work gets really, really exciting, and really, really powerful, if we can do it right, with the right heart, for sure.
Well, I can't believe, like, we're already at the end. This went really quick for me again, but I just love what you're sharing, and that understanding of sort of like, here's how our menstrual cycle in the different phases affects who we are. Tell me a little bit, I feel like you're offering anything, or you have anything going on right now that people are listening that might want to know about, and then we can talk a little bit about the next one, and kind of wrap up for today.
Oh, yeah, it has gone so quickly again. I feel like I just looked up and saw the time. What? Too much fun. So at the moment, I'm just in the process of launching my next Your Type and Your Cycle course. It's my 6-week transformative course where we work together one-to-one, learning all about your Enneagram type and your menstrual cycle, and how we can marry that information together to support you every single day of your life. We start October 1st. There's still time to sign up. We've got a few people signed up already, but there's definitely space if it feels like the right time to dig into this work. So all the information is linked in my bio, and as always, you can send me a message, drop me a DM, and would love to welcome any and everybody to that course starting October 1st, for sure.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, you know, don't forget about Sexy First Fridays, which is always the first Friday of the month. And we don't quite have our topic yet for October, but Sam and I are in the process of figuring that out. And then also we do offer now, if you want to actually, it's a donation based, the the third Friday of the month at the same time, where you can come and ask your questions, and we review the last Sexy First Friday. And we just, Sam and I just really wanted to provide more of a space for people to have access to us at sort of a lower cost, and that way you can actually ask your questions. And we had our first one last Friday. So it's the first Friday is the Sexy First Friday live, and then the Sexy Chat is always the third Friday of the month. And then I'm also working on some communication workshops and things like that, but I don't really fully know yet what I'm doing. So in my nine fashion, I'll let you know when they're coming into fruition. And then next time when we get together, we're going to talk about ovulation. So that is going to be next Tuesday, the same time. And then in 2 weeks, Tuesday, the same time, which is the first Tuesday in October, and I can't think of the exact date right now, we're going to talk about that luteal phase, and that'll kind of wrap up this 4-part series that Evie and I are doing, and we're really excited to kind of be sharing this with you as well. And thank you. There were many of you that hopped on and joined, and I did see someone comment like, yay, 9 representing. It's always nice to see other 9s, or maybe you had someone in relationship with 9. I don't know. I'm assuming you're a 9 as well. Great to see, and we really appreciate all of you that attended with us today, and we'll see you next week, same time.
See you then.
All
Can't wait.
right. Bye, Evie.
Bye. Bye. Bye.